The wind in Winterfell was colder than usual when King Robert Baratheon arrived. Snowflakes danced in the air, and the old stones of the castle wore a blanket of white. The king, bigger than life and louder than any storm, rode through the gates with a booming laugh and a barrel of wine. But this time, he wasn't here just to drink or remember old days. He came with a plan, a serious one. Robb Stark stood beside his father, Lord Eddard, to welcome the king. Jon Snow, the quiet bastard, stood at a distance. He was not part of royal affairs. But that day was different. After the feast, Robert asked for a private meeting with Eddard, Robb, and to everyone's surprise, Jon. "You're both like sons to me," Robert said, sitting heavily on the fur-covered chair in Ned's solar. "Ned, you know that, and these boys, they've grown strong. The North is cold, stubborn, and proud, just like you." Ned gave a small nod, not sure where this was going. Robb looked nervous. Jon just stayed silent. "I need to keep the realm united," Robert said. "The Lannisters, they grow bolder. Trouble stirs in the south. I don't trust those golden-haired snakes. But the North, I trust the North, and I trust you." Ned's eyes narrowed. "Say what you mean, Robert." Robert looked between Jon and Robb. "I want them to be brothers, not just by blood, but by oath. Robb will be the Lord of Winterfell one day. Jon, well, he might not be true-born, but he's still your son. The people love him. The men respect him. I want you two to form a political alliance, share power, protect each other, and rule the North together. As one." Jon blinked, confused. Robb frowned. "Share Winterfell?" With Jon. Robert laughed, but it wasn't joyful. "Not just share, lead together. Two wolves are stronger than one. I've seen too many brothers turn against each other. I want this house to stay whole." Ned didn't answer right away. His face was stone. He loved both boys, but the idea was risky. Jon was still a bastard in the eyes of Westeros, and the North had its own ways. "What you're asking," Ned said slowly, "will cause whispers. The bannermen may not accept it." Robert slammed his cup on the table. "Let them whisper. I'm the king. My word has weight." Robb spoke next. "Father, I love Jon. He's my brother in all but name. But the lords won't follow a bastard." Before Ned could reply, Jon stepped forward. "With respect, Your Grace, I never wanted power. I'm not a Stark. I'm just Jon." Robert stood up, eyes sharp now. "That's where you're wrong, boy. You're more Stark than half the lords I know. I saw the way you handled that sword in the yard. I've seen bastards rise higher than kings. You have the fire, Jon. Don't waste it at the wall." Jon looked down, heart beating faster. He had dreamed of something more, but not like this. This was dangerous. It would make enemies. Robert walked to him and put a hand on his shoulder. "You won't be alone. Robb's with you. You two together can make the North stronger than ever before." Ned finally spoke. "I need time to think. This is no small matter." Robert nodded. "Take your time, old friend, but not too long. The realm is changing. We must change with it." That night, Robb and Jon sat in the Godswood under the great weirwood tree. The snow was falling heavier now. Robb looked at Jon, his breath misting in the cold air. "Would you do it? Rule together?" Jon shook his head slowly. "I don't know. I always thought I'd take the black, that I'd be forgotten." Robb smiled faintly. "You'll never be forgotten, Jon. Not by me." Silence settled between them, but both boys knew nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning came with a heavy grey sky. Snow piled on the battlements of Winterfell like the weight that now pressed down on both Robb Stark and Jon Snow's hearts. Word had spread faster than a raven's flight. The king wanted Jon Snow raised beside Robb as a co-ruler of the North. Whispers ran through the courtyards like fire. Servants whispered behind doors. Stable hands paused their work to gossip. Maesters in their chambers scratched notes about a possible northern divide. Even the ravens seemed to caw more urgently. Lord Eddard Stark remained quiet. He hadn't yet spoken to either of his sons again since the king's proposal. He walked the halls with a grim expression, as if the ghosts of Winterfell were speaking louder than the living. Robb stood near the training yard, watching Jon spar with Sir Roderick's squires. Jon fought with grace, fast and smart. He won more often than not. But now, Robb wasn't just seeing his brother. He was seeing a rival. The thought made him sick. Later that evening, Eddard called them both to his study. His face was pale, his beard thick with frost from walking the outer wall. "I've spoken with the king again," he said. "He leaves in 2 days. He expects an answer by dawn." Robb clenched his fists. "Father, this will divide the north. If you name Jon as my equal, what happens when I marry? When I have sons? Who will rule then?" Jon spoke quietly. "I told you, I don't want this." "But what if you take it?" Robb's tone sharpened. "Even if you don't mean to, the moment people start calling you Lord Snow, or worse, the true Stark, they'll start choosing sides." Eddard raised a hand. "Enough. I've lived through one war that tore families apart. I won't watch it happen again." He paused, then looked at Jon. "There is another way." Jon looked up. "The king wants unity, not necessarily rulership. If you were legitimized, if you became Jon Stark, lord of a new holdfast, perhaps Carhold, or the Dreadfort if House Bolton continues to rot in dishonor, then the alliance could still stand. As a bannerman, not as a rival." Jon's heart stopped. "Legitimized." Ned nodded slowly. "It would require royal approval, but Robert is willing." Robb stared at Jon. "That changes everything." "No, it doesn't," Jon said sharply. "I never asked for any of this. I never wanted to be a lord. I never wanted to be your equal or your enemy. But you'd take the name," Robb said bitterly. "You'd take the Stark name that I was born with." "I never had a name," Jon snapped. "You think I don't know what it's like to live in shadows? To eat with the servants? To be your brother but not your equal in anything? I've bled for Winterfell too, Robb. Maybe I deserve something more." Silence fell again. Ned looked between them. His eyes were tired, sad. "You are both my sons. One by blood, one by name, but no less loved. I won't live forever. What matters is that you stand together, not tear each other apart." That night, Jon walked the ramparts alone. The snow bit into his skin, but he barely felt it. He was being offered something most bastards only dreamed of: a name, a place, a future. But at what cost? Inside the great hall, Robb sat with Theon Greyjoy, slamming down cups of wine. Theon, ever smug, leaned closer. "You don't trust him," he said. Robb narrowed his eyes. "He's my brother." Theon smirked. "You just called him a bastard yesterday. Today, he's a threat to your legacy. If your father dies, and Jon has half the North's support, how long before they name him Warden of the North?" Robb slammed his cup down. "That won't happen." "You sure?" Theon said, raising an eyebrow. "Because I've seen what men do when titles are offered. Even brothers turn to wolves." Robb stood and left without another word. By the next morning, Jon had made his choice. He entered the great hall, where Robert, Ned, and Robb were waiting. The king sipped from his wine, already flushed. Jon knelt. "Your Grace, I am honored by your offer, but I cannot accept lordship or land or name." Robert leaned back. "Why in the seven hells not?" "Because I know what I am and what I'm not. I'll serve my family with my sword and life, but not with politics." Robert grunted. "Bah! The North breeds stubborn fools." But Eddard looked proud, and Robb looked relieved. Jon turned to Robb. "You're my brother. Nothing changes that. I fight for you, not against you." For now, The wolves stayed together, but winter was coming, and peace never lasted long in Westeros. Winterfell settled into silence after King Robert's departure, but silence in the north was never peaceful. It was the quiet before the storm. Jon Snow had refused titles, land, and even the Stark name. He thought his decision would bring calm. Instead, it stirred more whispers than ever. Now he was the boy who turned down power, the bastard who walked away from a crown. That kind of story made people curious, and curiosity was dangerous. At first, Robb believed the storm had passed. He and Jon trained together like before, and though things were tense at times, they still laughed over meals and remembered their childhood hunts through the Godswood. But the North had long memories, and the lords who'd come to visit Robert had seen everything. They saw two boys, both capable, both strong, standing beside a king who spoke of uniting the North through both of them. They'd seen the possibility, and now they began choosing sides. It started with the Ravens. Letters came from the Dustins, the Manderleys, even House Serwyn. All had kind words for Robb, but each ended with strange compliments about Jon. A fine young man, noble of spirit, born a bastard but full of honor. These weren't just pleasantries. They were feelers testing how Jon fit into the northern game. Jon, for his part, kept away from politics. He trained with Sir Roderick, he helped with patrols, he even taught Bran some sword work. But wherever he went, eyes followed, some with respect, some with suspicion. Then, 10 days after Robert left, the Raven from White Harbour arrived. Lord Wyman Manderley offered Jon Snow a marriage alliance with his niece, Lady Lyra Manderley. Robb read the letter first. His face turned pale, then red. He stormed into the great hall where Jon was speaking with Maester Luwin. "You said you didn't want power," Robb hissed, throwing the letter on the table. Jon picked it up, eyes widening as he read. "I didn't know about this. You didn't refuse it either. I only just saw it." "It doesn't matter," Robb cut him off. "The Manderleys are one of the oldest and richest houses in the north. This is a political move. They're naming you a Stark without using the word." Maester Luwin cleared his throat. "My lords, if I may, Lord Wyman has always been careful. He may simply see value in Jon as a man of honor, not a claim to power." Robb ignored him. "You think they're offering this because of your good manners?" "No. They see a second Stark, and they're hedging their bets." Jon clenched his jaw. "I never asked for this. I didn't send ravens. I didn't plan it." "No," Robb said coldly. "But you haven't said no either." That night, Jon walked the Godswood again. The weirwood tree stood silent, its red leaves like frozen blood. Ghost padded at his side, silent as ever. He didn't want to fight Robb, but he also couldn't ignore what was happening. The Manderleys were offering him something more than a bride. They were offering him legitimacy without needing the king's blessing, power without politics, and a chance to be seen. The worst part? A small voice inside him wanted it. The next morning, Ned Stark summoned both boys once more. "This ends now," he said firmly. Jon and Robb stood stiff, like soldiers awaiting punishment. Ned held the letter from White Harbour in his hand. "Jon, I will not order you to refuse this proposal. You are a man grown, and you have the right to make choices for your future." Jon opened his mouth to speak, but Ned raised a hand. "However, know this. If you accept it, you will no longer live in Winterfell. You will not be my ward. You will not sit at this table." Jon's heart sank. "You'd cast me out." "I'd free you to make your own path," Ned said, voice low. "You cannot be both a Stark and a Snow when it suits you." Jon turned to Robb. "Is this what you want?" Robb didn't answer for a long time. Then, quietly, "I want my brother, not a threat." Jon nodded slowly. "Then I'll send my answer today." He walked away, stiff and quiet. Maester Lewin later wrote the letter. With deep respect, Jon Snow humbly declines the offer of marriage to Lady Lyra, citing his personal vow to serve Winterfell and his family as a loyal son, though not in name. That letter calmed the north. For now, but rumors don't die easily in Westeros. And as Jon sat alone in his chambers that night, staring at the flame of a single candle, he wondered if he had just locked himself into a future with no name, no wife, and no true place at all. Only the cold, only the snow. Winterfell was colder than usual, but it wasn't just the weather. Something deeper had frozen between Robb and Jon, something they couldn't name. They still trained together, still shared meals and conversations, but the laughter was gone. Every word now felt measured. Every glance held weight. And though Jon had refused the Manderley offer, everyone remembered that he'd been considered. That was enough to keep the whispers alive. It got worse when Lord Greatjon Umber visited Winterfell. A large man with a voice that could wake the dead and fists like hammers. Greatjon had always spoken his mind, whether people liked it or not. He greeted Robb like a second father, clapping him hard on the back. But when he saw Jon, he raised a thick brow. "The bastard's still here?" he said, half joking. "I thought the king had plans for him." Jon stiffened, but nodded politely. "I'm exactly where I should be, my lord." Greatjon squinted at him. "Aye? And where's that? At your brother's side, or waiting for his place?" Robb stepped in. "He's my brother. His place is with me." "Is it?" the old lord asked, rubbing his beard. "Or is he just too proud to take the Stark name and too stubborn to leave?" The words were loud, meant to be heard. The tension in the hall was thick for days after. Other bannermen who visited Winterfell didn't say as much, but the question lingered in their eyes. Why was Jon Snow still here? Then came the news from the Wall. Benjen Stark was missing beyond the Wall, and the Night's Watch had lost contact. A group of rangers had vanished without a trace. Something terrible was stirring in the north, and the Watch needed men. Jon heard the news in the courtyard. He stood still for a long time, staring out past the towers, as if he could see the Wall from where he stood. Robb found him there. "You're thinking of leaving?" Robb said quietly. "I should have gone years ago," Jon replied. Benjen said, "The Wall was where I belonged. Maybe I should have listened." Robb frowned. "You're not running, are you?" Jon turned to him, something burning behind his eyes. "I'm trying to find a place where I'm not a shadow. I never treated you like that." "No, you didn't," Jon admitted. "But that doesn't change what I am, or how the world sees me." Robb hesitated, then said, "If you leave, and something happens to Father, I'll be alone here." "You won't be alone," Jon said. "You'll be the Lord of Winterfell." Robb looked away. "That's not what I meant." That night, Ned Stark called Jon to his solar. The candlelight flickered across his worn face. "You've been thinking about the Wall," Ned said. "I see it in your eyes." Jon nodded. "If I take the Black, no lord will ever try to marry me into power. No one will ever whisper about me stealing anything. I'll just serve, with honor." Ned stood slowly, walked to the window. The snow fell softly beyond the glass. "You're a good man, Jon," Ned said. "But the Wall is a hard place. It'll take things from you, parts of you. Are you ready to lose them?" Jon swallowed. "What have I got to lose?" Ned didn't answer right away. Then he walked over to a locked chest and opened it. From it, he took out a long, cloth-wrapped bundle. He unwrapped it and revealed a sword, Longclaw. It was a Valyrian steel blade, beautiful, dark, and deadly. Jon stared at it. "Is that—" "It belonged to House Mormont," Ned said. "But it was returned to Winterfell after Ser Jorah left for the Wall. I kept it, for the day a Stark went back to the Watch." Jon's hands shook as he took it. "Does this mean I have your blessing?" "It means Ned said softly, "that no matter what you do or where you go, you'll always be my son. Maybe not in name, but in blood and in heart." The next morning, the ravens were sent. Jon Snow was going to take the Black. The decision shook Winterfell like a quiet thunder. Robb didn't speak to him the whole day. When Jon went to say goodbye, Robb was in the Godswood, sitting beneath the weirwood tree with a look that could freeze fire. "You're running," Robb said. "I'm choosing peace," Jon answered. "No," Robb snapped, standing. "You're choosing exile, because you're afraid." Jon took a breath. "And you're not afraid? That I might one day be stronger than you? Loved more than you?" Robb didn't answer. They stood there, two brothers, hearts full of fire and frost, both too proud to admit how much they needed each other. When Jon rode out the next morning, Robb didn't come to see him off. And as Winterfell grew colder, so did the hearts of the two boys raised as brothers, now set on paths that would never again truly meet. The gates of Winterfell closed behind Jon Snow with a long, echoing groan, like the castle itself was mourning his departure. Robb Stark watched from the highest tower. He didn't move, didn't wave. He just stood there, jaw tight, fists clenched behind his back, heart heavy with something he couldn't name. It wasn't just sadness. It was something colder, sharper. It was abandonment. Jon had left again. First, he refused power. Then he refused Robb, took the sword, took the Night's Watch oath before even saying a real goodbye. And now, Robb was alone. That night, Robb dined with his father in silence. The empty seat beside him, a place Jon had filled for years, stared back at him like a ghost. "You're angry with him," Ned said, breaking the quiet. Robb stabbed at his food. "He walked away from everything. From me." Ned raised his brow. "He walked away from ambition, from whispers, from the chance to be more than just a bastard. That wasn't easy, Robb. I never asked him to do any of it." "No," Ned agreed. "But you also never told him to stay." Robb didn't respond. He wanted to say something cruel, something sharp, but the words stuck in his throat like ice. And then, as if the gods had been listening, a raven arrived the next morning with news that would shake the Stark household to its core. King Robert Baratheon was dead, killed by a boar on a hunt, they said. But Ned didn't believe it. The letter was cold and short, stamped with the Lannister lion, not the stag. Cersei Lannister had taken the throne in her son's name, and the Queen had summoned Ned to King's Landing immediately. Within hours, Winterfell erupted into motion. Bannermen were called, guards were doubled. The king's death meant war was brewing, and House Stark was right in the storm's path. But with Jon gone, Robb was no longer just a son. He was now heir, and that weight came crashing down fast. Later that day, Ned called Robb into the Godswood. Snow fell between the red leaves. The old gods watched in silence. "I must go to King's Landing," Ned said, his breath fogging in the cold air. "I won't lie to you, Robb. I may not return." Robb swallowed hard. "Then I'll go with you." "No," Ned said. "You'll stay here. You are Lord of Winterfell in my absence." Robb froze. "Father, I'm not ready." "You think I was ready?" Ned asked. "When my father and brother were burned alive in the capital, I became Lord Stark overnight. Ready or not, the North looks to you now." Robb's voice cracked. "But what if something happens to you?" Ned rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then you will lead." That night, Robb walked the ramparts alone, the wind howling like a ghost through the towers. He remembered every moment with Jon laughing by the lake, sneaking into the kitchens, training in the yard, dreaming of adventures. Now Jon was gone, and Robb was left to carry the name, the weight, the sword, and the fear. A few days later, the worst came true. A raven from King's Landing. Lord Eddard Stark arrested for treason, accused of trying to seize the throne from Joffrey Baratheon, branded a traitor. Robb read the letter in silence, his hand shaking, his knuckles white. Maester Lewin waited for his reaction. Robb finally looked up. His voice was quiet. "Call the banners." Lewin blinked. "All of them?" "Every house, loyal to the Starks. From White Harbour to the last hearth." Lewin hesitated. "War, my lord?" Robb nodded once. "If they have my father, they'll pay for it." And so the raven flew, and the banners of the north black bears, white mermen, grey direwolves rose like a tide. In the weeks that followed, Robb Stark was no longer a boy. He moved like a commander, spoke like a lord. He trained twice as hard, met with bannermen daily. The weight of the north sat on his shoulders, and for the first time he carried it like a man. But every night he still walked to the godswood, sat beneath the weirwood, and thought of Jon. Would he hear of this in the night's watch? Would he come back if he knew? Or had Jon truly left him forever? And in the darkness, Robb began to understand something bitter. Sometimes you don't lose brothers in war. You lose them in silence. The north was rising. Robb Stark, now called the Young Wolf by lords and small folk alike, had summoned his bannermen. Winterfell's courtyard overflowed with men, soldiers sharpening swords, stable boys running messages, blacksmiths hammering day and night. Wolves were preparing for war. But far beyond the noise and steel, Jon Snow stood at the top of the wall, the wind screaming in his ears. The chill here wasn't like Winterfell. It was older, wilder. The kind of cold that crawled under your skin and whispered truths you didn't want to hear. Jon stared out into the frozen wilderness beyond the wall. He couldn't stop thinking about the raven that hadn't come but should have. If something had happened to his father, he would have known. If Robb had gone to war, Jon would have felt it, wouldn't he? That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the rookery, watching the ravens shift and flutter in their cages. Then a noise came. The door creaked open. It was Samwell Tarly, his friend. "Jon," Sam whispered, clutching a scroll in his chubby fingers. "A raven just arrived. From Maester Lewin of Winterfell." Jon snatched the scroll before Sam could finish. His hands trembled as he read the words. "Lord Eddard Stark arrested in King's Landing. Accused of treason. Robb has called the banners. War is coming." Jon sat down hard on the cold stone bench. The world spun. His father a traitor? Impossible. Robb leading an army? He tried to picture his brother on a battlefield and failed. But one thought burned brighter than the rest. "They need me." He stood. "I have to go back." Sam's eyes widened. "Jon, you can't. You've taken the oath." "I don't care. My father is in danger. My brother's at war. I can't sit here pretending the wall is more important." "But it is," Sam insisted. "If you break your vows, you'll be a deserter. They'll hang you." Jon didn't answer. He stormed out of the rookery and went straight to his chambers. He threw his things into a sack: food, clothes, water, Longclaw. Ghost whined low but followed close. He reached the stables just before midnight. The snow fell thick and fast. No one saw him. Until someone did. "Going somewhere, Snow?" Jon froze. It was Sir Alistair Thorne, his ever-present tormentor. The man stepped out from the shadows, sneering. "You always had that Stark pride," he said. "Now you're going to throw it away to play hero. You're just a bastard boy with a sword too big for him." Jon didn't answer. He mounted his horse. "Go on, then," Sir Alistair spat. "Go die like your father. They say traitors breed traitors." That was enough. Jon kicked his horse and rode hard through the gate, out into the dark. The wind bit his face. Snow blinded him. But he kept going, toward Winterfell, toward war, toward family. For 2 days he rode alone. On the 3rd day he was found. A black-cloaked rider stepped out of the trees. Then another. Then 4 more. Jon reached for Longclaw. but stopped when he saw who led them. Lord Commander Jean Mormont. Jon's heart sank. He'd come for him. "You're lucky we found you first," Mormont said coldly. "Others might have killed you on sight. You're a deserter, Jon Snow." Jon dismounted, ashamed but not backing down. "My father is a prisoner. My brother has gone to war. I couldn't sit at the wall and do nothing." Mormont narrowed his eyes. "And you think running away from your duty makes you better, braver?" "I think it makes me human," Jon said quietly. The silence hung heavy between them. Mormont sighed. "Do you think you're the first man to want to protect his family? Every one of us had someone we left behind. But the wall comes first." Jon looked away. "Then I'll return. I'll accept punishment." "Good," Mormont said, "because you're going to need us soon. The war in the south is one thing, but beyond the wall, something worse is coming." Jon looked up, confused. "Your brother's war will decide who wears a crown," Mormont said. "Ours will decide if there's a realm left to wear it." They rode back together. But Jon's thoughts were far away. Robb was fighting men with swords. Jon would be fighting monsters with shadows in their eyes. Still, he wrote a letter, a short one, sent by Raven. "Robb, I ride with the watch. I have not forgotten you. You are my brother always. Fight with honor, rule with wisdom, and if you live, don't forget me. Jon." Back at Winterfell, Robb read the letter under candlelight, and for the first time since Jon left, he smiled. Just a little. Just enough. The banners of the north rode south under snow-grey skies, their horses kicking up the frozen mud of the King's Road. Robb Stark led them, armoured in stark steel, his direwolf Grey Wind pacing silently at his side like a shadow of death. Behind him rode the great houses, Umber, Manderley, Glover, Karstark, each sworn to House Stark, each ready for war. They called him the Young Wolf now, but Robb didn't feel young anymore. The day he crossed the Green Fork, he had already fought 2 battles, won both. The Lannisters had underestimated him, sent lesser lords to meet him in the field, and paid the price. At the Whispering Wood, he had captured Jaime Lannister himself. Robb had him chained, gagged, and tossed in a cage. He had won victories, but he hadn't won peace, because his father was still a prisoner, and King's Landing was still full of lions. That night, Robb sat by the fire in his command tent, his sword across his knees, staring at a map stained with wine and blood. Catelyn Stark entered quietly, her face drawn with worry. She had returned from Riverrun after visiting her dying father, and now she saw her son standing taller, speaking louder but with eyes that had aged too fast. "You're winning battles," she said softly, "but wars are not won on battlefields alone." Robb didn't look up. "They will hear us roar at the gates of King's Landing. I'll trade Jaime for father." Catelyn stepped closer. "And if they don't agree?" He met her eyes now. His were colder. "Then I'll burn their city to the ground." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Your father raised you better than that." Robb didn't answer. He wasn't sure who he was anymore. Just a boy with a sword and a kingdom made of ice and blood. But then the news came. A raven, flown straight from King's Landing. Lord Eddard Stark, executed for treason, beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept by command of King Joffrey Baratheon. Robb dropped the letter before he finished reading it. The tent fell silent. His breath hitched. His lips trembled. But he didn't cry. Not here. Not in front of his men. Catelyn caught the letter. Her hands shook as she read it, and when she finished, she collapsed onto the ground, her voice strangled by grief. They killed him. They murdered him." Robb stood frozen. The fire flickered behind him. Grey Wind snarled low in the corner. Then Robb turned, walked outside into the cold night. His bannermen gathered, drawn by the noise. lords with swords, knights with titles, soldiers with frozen boots. He stood before them, wind howling around his cloak. "They murdered my father," he said, his voice raw. "They called him a traitor and cut off his head like a thief in the market. They spit on the name Stark." He looked out at the faces, some grim, some shocked, some burning with rage. "We are not traitors," Robb said. "We are not thieves. We are the blood of the first men, and we will have justice." Lord Greatjon Umber stepped forward, sword raised high. "To hell with King's Landing," he roared. "There sits a boy king in gold and lies, wearing a crown he didn't earn. Let the South fight their games. Let them name their kings." He turned and dropped to one knee. "There sits the only king I mean to bow to, the king in the north." One by one, the lords followed. The Manderleys, the Glovers, the Karstarks. Swords scraped from scabbards. Knees hit the frozen ground. "The king in the north! The king in the north!" The chant rose like a storm. Robb stood at its center, his eyes wide, his heart pounding. He had not asked for a crown, but it was his now. Later that night, he sat alone in his tent, away from the cheers and feasts. His crown, a simple ring of bronze and iron, lay untouched beside him. He read Jon's last letter again. "You are my brother always. Fight with honor, rule with wisdom, and if you live, don't forget me." Robb smiled bitterly. "I won't forget you, Jon," he whispered. "But I don't know who I am anymore." Outside, snow began to fall again. Light at first, but heavier was coming, and far to the north, on top of the wall, Jon Snow watched that same snow fall. He didn't yet know his father was dead. He didn't yet know his brother had been crowned. But he felt it. In his bones. In his blood. The wolves had been set loose. And winter was truly here. The wall stood silent under the weight of the storm. Snow fell in sheets, the sky a curtain of grey, and the world beyond the gate had vanished into white. Jon Snow stood atop the parapets. Ghost beside him, watching the storm as if it could speak. He didn't know yet, not truly. The last raven had gone missing in the snow. No word from the south in over a fortnight. Still, something twisted in his gut every night when he lay in his cold bunk at Castle Black, a feeling, heavy and sharp, like a blade behind the ribs. That night, it arrived. A raven, frost-covered and half-dead, staggered into the rookery just before dawn. Sam brought him the scroll with trembling hands. Jon read it once. Then, again, his breath caught. Lord Eddard Stark was executed for treason. Robb Stark has been named king in the north by all the great houses. The letter dropped from his fingers. Ghost let out a low, mournful howl that echoed through the silent halls of Castle Black. Jon sat down hard on the bench. His father was dead. No, his uncle. That old truth still stung, even more so now. And Robb. Robb was no longer just a brother. He was a king. For a long time, Jon didn't speak. He didn't move. His thoughts spiraled like the snow outside, cold, endless, falling. When the sun rose, he went to the Lord Commander. Jean Mormont didn't say anything at first, just watched Jon with those deep, weathered eyes. "They killed him," Jon said quietly. "They took his head." Mormont nodded. "The South eats its own. My brother's declared for the North. He's a king now." "Then may the gods watch over him," Mormont said, "because the crown's a heavier curse than any sword." Jon gritted his teeth. "I should be with him." Mormont raised a brow. "You already tried to run once. Do you mean to break your vows again?" Jon looked away. "I didn't say you should," Mormont added, "but I won't lie. If you rode to him today, part of me wouldn't blame you." Jon glanced up. "But another part," the old bear continued, "knows this war he's fighting. It's just one of many. And the war you're meant for, it hasn't even begun yet." Jon left without answering, but he didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. He thought of Robb, crowned, armored, commanding lords and armies. He pictured him with his hair wet from rain, sword in hand, eyes dark with fury. A king. Jon should have felt proud, but instead he felt distance, as if Robb were a star in the sky now, bright, untouchable. He remembered the last thing Robb had said to him before he left. "You're running." Maybe he was. Maybe they both were. But from different monsters. Days later, another raven arrived, this one from Winterfell, sealed by Maester Luwin's own hand. Inside was a letter. To Jon Snow, "Your brother is now king, but he still walks like the boy who raced you through the woods and fought you in the yard. The world has placed a crown on his head, but inside he still remembers your face in the cold. He misses you. I see it in his silences, in the way he lingers by the godswood. He wanted me to write this, but couldn't find the words. So I will say them for him. He forgives you. He hopes you forgive him too. And when the war is over, if the gods allow it, he will stand beside you again, not as a king, but as your brother. Until then, remember who you are, Luwin." Jon folded the letter slowly. His hands trembled, but he held back the tears. That night he stood once more atop the wall. The stars burned bright in the black sky. Behind him, the men of the Night's Watch prepared for an expedition beyond the wall. Strange things were stirring, dead men walking, shadows in the snow. Jon placed the letter inside his cloak, near his heart. "I'll remember," he whispered. "I'll remember you, Robb, no matter what happens." Far to the south, Robb Stark rode through the riverlands, sword drawn, grey wind at his side, chasing a war he hadn't asked for. He wore the crown of the north, but his eyes often drifted toward the sky at night, wondering where Jon was, if he was alive, if the snow touched him the same way it did back home. The world had torn them apart. One brother wore a crown, the other wore black, but in their hearts they were still just wolves. And wolves, even when scattered by winter, always find their way back home.